I am so thrilled to get the experience to be at VoiceBox because I am from a family of 8 and you can never tell a story without being interrupted. Except tonight. Unless Jody.
There's still time.
September is my favorite time of year. I am so happy to scrape summer off of my skin. I love that cool breeze on your face when you zip up your hoodie, that amazing cerulean blue sky like today, and the clouds are so puffy and friendly, and when you have a stoned sister sitting next to you describing it, I mean, is there any more fun than that? The trees are all showing off their intense colors of gold and amber and crimson, and giving spring a run for its money. There's a crisp bite in the air and in the apples. And apples only mean one thing to me, school. School starts back up with those newly sharpened pencils, with the clean backpack that doesn't have 3 weeks of rotted snacks in them. You know, shiny floors that have not yet been tormented by the dirt on the sneakers. Smiling teachers. Usually wearing something teachery. With about 48 apples on their desk. And in case you didn't notice by this adorable vest, I'll let you in on a fun fact about me. I have gone back to school in September 52 times. Think about that, because the average is about 12, and I have 40 more. Thank you. I loved it all. I loved the good, the bad, the ugly. Teaching is an art form for me. I don't really have a lot of talents, but I was pretty damn good at teaching, and I really do get a kick out of the kids. Teaching is the circle of life, and it's in 9 short months, and September is kind of like our New Year's Day. Everything starts anew. It's a whole group of young minds and new personalities. It's within days that you're calling them my kids. And let me assure you though, when we get the roll with the names of those new students on it, and we gather in our teacher gossipy groups that they say is not professional, it's kind of like the fantasy football picks. Yeah, it's like this. Oh, you got that one. Yikes. Or, oh, that's the family that gives out the great gift cards at Christmas. Nice pick, nice score. September starts with the event that teachers really look forward to about as much as having their fingernails pulled out. It is the meet and greet. It is long, it is crazy, it is 3 hours of unorganized, open-door circus activity. Pasted smile on the face, showing where to put those supplies about 26 times, shaking hands, reassuring, listening. This is where we meet the students, and for the first time, and the parents. And as exhaustive as this is, we really do realize that parents are giving us their greatest gift, their children. It's true. Although I am not sure that I need to hear about how well they do push-ups or what potato chips do to their bowels. True stories. I remember one year when I saw my homeroom class roll and I was pretty much scared shitless. Not because of the child, but because of the parent, the mom. I usually had a pretty good relationship with my community, but there were some folks that were just plain scary. And I had plenty to fear regarding Mrs. Y, which I'm not even going to give her real name in case she sees this on YouTube. She was so mean and so terrifying. She had actually been suspended from school grounds for a year because she threatened to kill her son's 3rd grade teacher. I can't make that up. So when I say Mrs. Y, it's kind of like, Mrs. Y. It's a kind of good abbreviation for her. So the day of the meet and greet arrived, as did Mrs. Y and her son, Joe. So Joe was the whitest child that I have ever laid eyes on. Translucent, like powder, like snow. He had blonde hair and blue eyes. He was not an albino, but he kind of looked like Bart Simpson. And Mrs. Y looked like a human bulldozer. as she dragged Joe alongside her. His mom introduced herself, and we shook hands, and I showed them where to put their supplies, and I'm kind of shaky, and I asked if they had any questions, and the next words that came out of her mouth were memorable. Mrs. Schaedel, you need to know that before he goes out for recess, you need to put the suntan lotion on Joe. What? Yeah, I shit you not. I just stared at her, and then she stared at me. And I was like a rock between a rock and a hard place. Put the lotion on the body and not be killed, or put the lotion on the body and be fired, because that's something in the How to Be a Teacher book that's pretty clear. I mean, they don't just come out and say it, but you just can't put lotion on a kid. I mean, if side hugs are out, I gotta think smoothing cream on a kid is too. So it took me a minute and all of my experience for my brain to tell my mouth what to say. And I looked at Joe and I just said, Joe, I think probably by 5th grade, you probably could put your own suntan lotion on, right? Silence of the lamb. And of Mrs. Y. And finally, she looked at me and she goes, okay. And I felt like I dodged a bullet, literally. And let me tell you, every day, exactly 5 minutes to recess, that child pulled out the sunscreen and he put it on. And he remained translucent the entire year. We live in Virginia, and that's not easy. This was the first battle, but it seemed to actually end the years of war. Either that or she was afraid of being suspended again. This did not stop her from writing emails to me every day. Every freaking day. And at the end of the year, our principal asked us to share some accomplishments at our last faculty meeting, and I printed out every one of those emails, and I taped them together, and I made them into a long train, which I wore into the faculty meeting. And I knew, they knew, and I took a well-deserved bow for just being alive. Now, this is not the first time that I had accrued daily communication. When I first started at school, where I spent most of my career, I was a special education teacher. And I had the same class of students for 3 years. So I had them in kindergarten, 1st, and 2nd. And one little cherub was named Matthew. And he was the sweetest little boy. He had grubby hands, he had thick smudged eyeglasses, he had this curly, unruly blonde hair, and he had the most dazzling smile you've ever seen. And his mom was a hoot. She was only about 4 foot 5 inches tall. She wore the same outfit every time I saw her, which included knee-length shorts and basketball socks pulled all the way up to her knees. And every day for those 3 years, I got a handwritten note from Matthew's mom. Such things like, "Dear Mrs. Schaedel, please make sure Matthew wears his mittens outside." Okay. Or, "Dear Mrs. Schaedel, Matthew can't zip up his jacket, so please help him," which was basically because it was so filled with crud that Hercules couldn't have gotten that damn thing out. All right, but that's not actually what made this unique. Every single letter was signed the same way. Betty Lennon, and underneath in parentheses, Matthew's mom. For 3 years. And like I would forget from one day to the next. And I only had 9 kids in class. Betty Lennon, Matthew's mom, will always hold a special place in my heart. And the funny thing about Matthew, even as he grew, we still kept in touch, but not every day. So I switched from teaching special ed to teaching 5th grade after that 3rd year, and I loved it. I stayed in 5th grade for 19 years. Every September, thank you, I felt like it was the final scene in the movie To Sir with Love with Sidney Poitier. He had just finished a year of great challenges, and he was sitting at his desk exhausted after using all his energy through the school year to change those wild hooligans into a cultured class of respectful graduates. His head is in his hands, and suddenly, in comes the new class of crazy hooligans to let him know that he's their teacher for next year. That's what I felt like. Every year I had a new crop to lead from hooliganism to hardworking, helpful, and maybe even hygienic 10-year-olds. One of my favorite years was the year I had 15 boys and 9 girls. I knew a lot of these students and their parents because they were my son JP's age, and they were all friends. And we had so much fun. It was loud, it was boisterous, and hilarious. It was swinging them around when they got a good grade in my barbershop chair, which I had acquired. I'd also pretend to cut their hair for no good reason. It was just fun. And there was a lot of learning about laughing at our mistakes that we would make and learning not to laugh at others. It was about wadding up paper to throw. It's boys. And teaching them prepositions that way to throw it to the garbage can, below, beyond, beside. It was learning respect mixed with responsibility. It was learning to use deodorant on a daily basis. Virginia, hot. The fact that it was such a boy-heavy class made me more aware of how much testosterone can influence the noise level. It was a gift, though, to learn to watch them become from little boys to young men. And after they left on that final day, I walked into the classroom and I saw all these empty desks. And I sat in my barbershop chair and I twirled it around. And I realized something. A great vacuum had come in and sucked out all of those energetic voices, the yelps, the howls of laughter. It was so quiet. And I looked down at the bookshelf and I see an envelope. And it had been left there, and inside was a card signed by all the boys, as well as a gift card to Victoria's Secret. Boys to men. I'm not making this stuff up. A huge aspect of teaching is the communication, and it continues long past the last day of school. The longer I taught in the community, the more kids I knew. I had some incredible relationships that formed with my kids. I've seen them grow up, have kids of their own, been to their weddings, even taught their kids. So they were my grandkids. I got to see Joe perform with the marching band, with his mom watching from the stands, sun lotion in hand, and to visit little Matthew Lennon, who worked at Walmart, as he patiently talked to each customer and listened to their needs while flashing that dazzling smile. We are in it through all the emotions, and as I said, the cycles of life, through happy births and even terrible, saddening deaths. Finding out about suicides, drug overdoses, accidents, it would break your heart. And I have attended more than my fair share of funerals of former students. I even gave the eulogy at one, at the behest of Betty Lennon, Matthew's mom. The years rolled by, and I began to think about retirement. This was pretty much because by this time, when my new class of hooligans would stumble into my classroom, I would just start with telling the kids I only have one rule. And I would make them guess it. Such answers would be like, we have to be kind, we can't yell in the hallway, do your homework, which were noble, and they had been drilled into them from earlier years, but no, I would say, no, it's even easier than that. It will save your life, and you will meet great success this year if you just follow one rule. And then I would dramatically lift the screen to reveal the Rosetta Stone in large red letters that simply said, "Don't annoy Mrs. Schaedel." I had one kid make a shirt for me. And I retired shortly after that in 2018. As each September rolls by now, I think of all the roles of educators. We're huggers, we're encouragers, we're moms, we're ringmasters of the circus, we're inventor of games, we're dryer of tears, and sometimes we're just human, with human flaws and failings. We don't always save that starfish, as much as we try, but we do have ginormous bladder capacity. That's our superpower. I think of how much we affect students' lives, what a holy gift we have been given. And I realize that in this circle of life, long past September, long past June, I really am able to touch the future. And I want to give a toast to all those teachers out there. Amen. Thank you.